you have to try and get a little bit of distance from them. You have to be able to say to yourself, they're not me, right? They have their own problems. I'm separate from them. The sense of being separate from them is very liberating, right? So they have issues and they're trying to drag me into it and they're trying to drag me down. But I'm not them. I have my own life and I'm not going to get involved. Sometimes you need to have empathy, but sometimes you need to shut that off. And so the best thing in life, though, is, that's why I say there's just so many angles to approach this from, is if they're like a deep narcissist, and that's probably the most common type of negative person you deal with in the world today, and we all have come across this, the power that you have is to recognize people like that before you get involved with them and to not get involved with them, right? And so they have signs, things that you can pick up in advance. People who are toxic, I don't know if we're going to say toxic and negative are the same here. They don't show it immediately. They're good at deceiving you. They can be very charming. They can be very dramatic. They pull you in with their great stories. Sometimes they're even charismatic. A lot of important CEOs in the world, people like Elon Musk, are raging narcissists. They appear very exciting and you want to get to know them. But you have to recognize that these are people that are probably going to use you, right? They don't see you as an individual. And the people you associate with, we're very, as humans, we're very open to the emotions of other people, right? And so the people you associate with have a huge role on who you are and the energy you have, your daily life, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have to be very, very careful who you let into your life, right? And God, Jay, I don't know. There's so many different angles to approach it from.
No, that's really thoughtful.
I tell people that don't judge people as far as who are you going to let into your life. Don't be deceived by the appearances. Don't judge people based on their intelligence, on their charm, on whether they're good or bad, etc. Judge them on their character, whether they have a weak or a strong character.
What are some of the signals, the signs we can look out for? Because I think what you just said is so true, that we naturally get attracted to people's appearance, intelligence, charisma, access, because we haven't really been trained to view character.
Yeah.
So I remember when I lived in the monastery, the highest quality or character trait that was considered the epitome of internal emotional evolution was humility. And so when you met someone who was humble and you met someone who didn't have false ego, they were considered of high character. And we were trained in order to understand that. But in the modern world, that isn't how the material world works. We're almost attracted to people who can come off arrogant and showboaty. And even if we sense we don't like that, we still believe that person has power. And so what are things that we have to look out for?
Well, also there are people who appear to be humble, but they're not really humble.
Agreed.
There's a lot of people now who feign humility because it's seen as a positive trait.
Yes.
So humans are born actors, and you have to kind of look behind the mask. So I tell people, I view it as strong or weak character. A strong character is a person who can take criticism, right? Who can work with other people, right? Who can deal with stressful situations, who can handle responsibility. And if there's something goes wrong, they take, I'm to blame for it. They don't look at other people. There's somebody you can rely on. You lean on them, and there's something there to lean on. You can rely on them in situations. A weak character is somebody who cannot take criticism. That is probably the number one characteristic, the worst trait, I think, in people, and a definite trait of negativity, is somebody who can't take any kind of criticism, right? They're so defensive. So that means they can get away with anything. They can say anything they want, and there's just like a wall, a shell around them. Right? So the ability in a work situation, in a relationship, to take criticism and be able to use it constructively is an incredibly useful and powerful trait to me that reveals strong character. How people handle stress is a really good sign of their character. So in a work situation, people are good at faking it and pretending that they're very strong. But when it gets really stressful and there's a lot of pressure on it, the mask falls off and they reveal that they can't handle it. They're too weak. They're reacting to everything. They can't get out of the moment. They're so impatient, and fragile. And so the ability to handle stress shows that somebody has something strong inside of them, right? Mm-hmm. How they handle power, right? So when people are kind of climbing up the ladder in a group or in a job, they generally try and pretend like they're with the group, but once they have power, that all falls off, and they can become abusive, and they feel like they can get away with things that they couldn't get away with before. They treat people below them miserably, etc. So when people have power, how do they handle it? Are they responsible? Do they suddenly become somebody different, or do they maintain the character that they had beforehand? Right? What kind of partners do they choose? Do they choose a spouse, a husband, a girlfriend, etc.? Somebody that they can push around, somebody that's inferior to them so that they can feel better about themselves? How do they look when they're playing like a game or they're in outdoor activities or something that has something to do with work? Are they so competitive they have to win at everything, even when it's like outside of that kind of environment, These are kind of traits that help me sort of judge a person's character.
Yeah, and these are often the things that we either ignore or we actually let them kind of fall by the wayside or don't pay enough attention to them because we think, oh no, but they're so smart and they're so this. And I wonder how much of that is also like, what does that say about us that we often get attracted to the wrong things within people? What does that say about us? Does that make us a strong or weak character?
I know that I tend to get involved with narcissistic people. It's a weakness of mine, right? And maybe it's because of my upbringing, and maybe it's because I feel a kind of emptiness inside of me, and that their charm and the attention that they pretend to give you is kind of enchanting or casts a spell on you and it draws you in. Yeah, so if you're dealing with your own weaknesses and your own emptiness inside, you're going to be drawn to people who fill that up. Or you're going to be drawn to causes and charismatic leaders that pretend to give you a purpose in your life because you don't have a purpose, but they have it for you, kind of thing. So a lot of it has to do, with ourselves, and we're attracted we're even attracted to negative people. And there are people who have patterns in their life where they deliberately choose the worst kind of person for them, right? And over and over and over again, because at least that makes them feel alive. At least the pain of it, gives them a sense of something dramatic. And so they deliberately bring on that kind of pain. So it's complicated. Yeah.
When you said that often we feel an emptiness inside, and you were saying maybe because of your upbringing, you felt that emptiness inside as well. Have you tried to fill that emptiness, or is there another solution?
Well, to me, it's why I wrote the book Mastery. The way I fill my emptiness and how I've done it since I was a kid is through my work and through my ideas and my thinking and how I'm constantly looking for new thoughts and new ways of looking at the world. So I find that if I didn't have my work as kind of, some people think of work as something that you just have to do, right? It's just a way to get money. But for me, it's a way to feel like I'm a human being, that I am who I am. I was destined to write these books, and it gives me every day I wake up and I know this is what I need to accomplish, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's why I read so many books. That's why I'm so intrigued by ideas. That's why I'm writing a book right now about a subject that very much captivates me, because it does feel that inner kind of emptiness. But on the other hand, as someone who meditates and practices a form of Zen meditation, there is a purpose to emptiness, right? It's not necessarily good to be always having to fill things up in your brain, like you're just pouring food into your system. There is something actually kind of intrinsically beautiful about the idea that there is emptiness, that I don't really have a self, that there is actually not, that there is no such thing as a mind. Actually, it's an illusion that we create, right? It's something it's something through words that we have. So that sense of emptiness, that I don't have an ego, or that I'm confronting the world and I'm just hearing and seeing things as they are, is actually a beautiful thing. So I have to kind of struggle against this idea of always having to fill myself up.
What's something you were saying you like observing humans and humanity? What's something that you've observed about humans over time that surprised you?
Well, nothing really surprises me, because I read a lot of history and I see that things just keep repeating over and over and over again. I know, though, since I had my stroke, and since I'm physically weak and there are things I can't do anymore, I've actually noticed that people respond to me differently, and it's actually very positive. So sometimes I can be very negative about people. That's kind of my inclination. That's how my mind tends to work, which is not necessarily a good thing. We all have these attitudes that make us look at the world a certain way. I tend to have a negative bent towards human nature. But I must say, people have been very, very kind to me since I've had my stroke. And it's sad that you have to have an accident like that to be able to perceive it. But I've seen another side where everyone wants to help me. They kind of empathize with the fact that I'm a little bit helpless in these situations. And it's also made me kind of feel differently about other people who have disabilities or things that they can't help in their lives. But the sense of I'm a little bit helpless and people are really eager to try and help me actually is something that has kind of surprised me in a way.
Yeah, I liked what you said there, that it's sad that someone has to go through something for us to then show that sides of ourselves, which means that it's always there. It means that it exists inherently within us.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because why do you think that is? Why do you think that is, that if it's inherently there, we don't display it at all times to all people?
I don't know. I mean, we're all born with a capacity for empathy. It's something that interests me a lot, because the feeling that I'm connecting very deeply to another person, let's say my wife, etc., is a very overpowering emotion. It gets me out of myself, and I'm seeing the world through her eyes, as opposed to me always projecting myself onto her. It's a very moving experience. And sometimes you go to a movie and you find yourself getting inside the characters, you're getting outside of yourself, and you're feeling this empathy for them, you're identifying with them. These are all very powerful emotions, right? And we all have the capacity for that. But the world we live in is actually a machinery to deaden those emotions, that sense of empathy, right? It just puts so much emphasis on ourselves, on our individuality, on who we are, our needs, the attention that we want, that we deserve. We're so focused on ourselves that natural feeling of wanting to get inside of another person. And it's very strange, Jay, because if you think about it, our inner lives are actually quite boring. The same thoughts repeat over and over and over again, the same emotions, the same preoccupations, the same anxieties. And other people, they're so different. They have their own worlds, right? It's like traveling to another country. So we should actually be much more oriented towards other people. We should have a natural interest in their world, because it takes us out of ourselves. It's like therapy. But it's been deadened by so many things in our world, by social media, by the pressures we're under, by just modern lifestyle. And so that empathetic muscle that everybody has is kind of atrophying. And yet there'll be moments where it kind of sparks to life, and you feel like, God, I want that. I want more of that in my life, more of that in my world. How do I get it?
What would you say is your most repeated thought on a daily basis?
Like, what do I need to do today? What's on my schedule?
Yeah.
So like I'm meditating in the morning and I'm trying to empty my mind and I'm going into what's known as a koan, right? And then these thoughts keep bubbling up and they're so annoying and it makes you aware of of the machinery of your own mind. And so to answer your question, it's always like, oh, did you remember that you have to call this person this afternoon? Did you remember that you have to change that reservation? Do you remember that you have to do this, that, the other? Scheduling things. So unimportant, so trivial, where I'm trying to open my mind up to something vast and important. It's little things like scheduling and stuff like that. Then there'll be other thoughts that will be repeating, like if I saw a movie from it, images will keep popping up from that and such. It makes you aware that you're not in control of your own mind, right?
How have you found over time with meditation and other practices, what have you used in order to start quietening, emptying, whatever the right word is for you, releasing those thoughts so that you can connect with the vastness, be creative or self-express?
Wow, it's not easy and it's an ongoing process. And I could say I'm maybe 10% of the way where I'd like to be. But first of all, you recognize, you go through a thing where a thought pops up and it's like, why am I thinking about that? I don't like it. You realize that it's just a thought. And what is a thought? Now, I know we're getting really weird and metaphysical here.
I like it.
But it's not real. It's a phantom, right? It has no reality. Reality is your body, the present moment, the birds outside, the sky, where you are sitting, the fact that you're alive, that your blood is pumping. These are real. But that thought in your mind is a shadow. It's a phantom. It doesn't exist. It has no reality. And so I go through this process where don't engage with it. And it's really weird because then my mind plays tricks on me and it pulls up a thought that's definitely going to engage me, right? Because it wants that. It's like a sugar rush. And so I go, okay, no, I'm not going to engage with it. And it made me realize as I went through that process that this is what social media is based on. Social media has mirrored the human brain on a large scale. We have thoughts that are designed to grab our emotions and make us think about them repetitively over and over again, compulsively, right? And there's probably a purpose behind that. But social media is actually a genius at that, at putting up things up there. They're going to engage our emotions, so we have to pay attention. So I always try every time that happens, I withdraw and I say, it's just a thought. It's not real. It's not who I am. This is a very important part of meditation. Your thoughts are not who you are. They're a separate part of yourself. You are something different from your own thoughts. I don't know if that means anything to you.
It does, definitely. And while we are not our thoughts and we are not our mind, our thoughts become our reality. Yeah. We find that a repetitive thought turns into a habit, that turns into a pattern, that turns into an action, becomes our reality. For example, I am a unorganized, lazy individual, usually translates into, oh, I forgot to send that, it didn't happen, because now it's a belief that's built up. And so it's so fascinating that something that's so not real becomes so real. And I've been really into seeing how thought editing is so useful as an activity and an exercise, because I've found so many of my thoughts become my beliefs that become my life. And I think a lot of people don't realize, because they don't realize that their thoughts are like clothes that you can change. We do believe that our thoughts are real and our reality,
right,
and whatever we're hearing in our head is exactly what is.
Right.
And we don't realize that, oh, it's like looking in your wardrobe and saying, I don't like the color green anymore, I'm going to change it for blue.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
Well, there was something I read recently in one of the Buddhist books that I like to read that said our minds are basically topsy-turvy. They're upside down. So the reality is we don't I mean, I don't want to get too deep into this, but we don't really have a self. The self is a construction of our minds. There actually is nothing there. And that kind of emptiness, that egolessness, is enlightenment. It's a beautiful feeling. And maybe in your life, you've touched upon it briefly. I know I've touched upon it briefly. It's not the reality I have every day, but that's real. And what's not real are the thoughts, but everything is turned upside down in our worlds. And so these delusionary thoughts about people, about who I am, about my habits, etc., they become our reality when it's exactly the opposite. Right? You have to be able to be aware of that. And so, meditation is all about becoming aware of these things, because we walk around like automatons. I'm very into this writer named Gurdjieff. I don't know if you've ever heard of Gurdjieff.
No, I haven't.
He was he's basically from Armenia. He was in the beginning of the 20th century. He was this man who was very interested in mysticism, and he traveled throughout Asia trying to find the essence of all the different esoteric philosophies. And he created his own philosophy. And it's very interesting, very exciting stuff. He wrote a book called In Search of the Miraculous that I highly recommend people. And it's not woo-woo stuff. He was a very, very practical man. He puts it in very practical terms. But his idea is that we walk around asleep. We're on automatic pilot constantly. We're not really aware that we're breathing, that we're existing. We're not aware where our thoughts come from. We're not aware of how our body moves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's a process of slowly becoming aware of these kinds of things that is really I've been doing this 14, 15 years now, and it's really, really kind of changed the course of my life, I have to say.
Yeah, I love that. And I can't wait to read that book now. And I couldn't agree more. I feel we're so disconnected from our mind and body that we constantly believe that someone outside of ourselves has the answer for how we feel. And while that may be true when you're seeing a doctor or a dentist or something of that professional nature, we don't really know how our body's been feeling for weeks or months until it crashes. And then we realize that we haven't paid enough attention to X or Y or Z, or a relationship in the same way has to end in order for us to realize that it had lost investment and energy or whatever it may be. And we're so far away from the self, or at least this version of the self, that we're not really aware. I love what you just said about the idea of how conscious are we of the fact that we're breathing, we're here, we're present, we're together, versus how much are we living up here.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because there's almost two realities that we're always dealing. And if we're getting too heady, I'm happy to move away from it. But it's almost like I've been thinking a lot about how, in one sense, what's out here is real, and in one sense, what here isn't. And at the same time, actually, what's going on here is the real, because it defines how I interact with everything else. And it can help me be a better filter, a better chooser, selector of the people I'm around and the places I visit.
So you say you have to kind of use the mind to be able to become present. It's a process.
I would say I'm alluding to that in discovery, not in pushing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I agree with that, definitely.
Yeah. I've been reflecting a lot recently about how most of what's happening is in the invisible world, and
that's very interesting. Tell me more about that.
So I was thinking that in one sense you have reality externally, the visible world, but how I make sense of that visible world is all in the invisible space. And ultimately, how I make sense of it is the reality that I experience, regardless of what's happening around me, which is why we realize that people we all are telling ourselves stories and narratives all day long, but how we're processing what we're experiencing is our reality, as opposed to the event or what someone said or social media, as you gave an example. Like, I can either sit here and say, like, I know that when I wake up in the morning and I start scrolling on social media, my mind is now moving 10 times, 100 times faster than if I don't do that. And I know that brushing my teeth and showering is a much more peaceful process if I haven't looked at my phone than if I do.
Right.
And so that choice is being made in the invisible world. And the visible world is simply something I'm interacting with and taking from or being affected by.
Well, so we mostly live in amid things that are invisible.
Yes.
Right? Symbols, etc.
Yes.
Language is a symbol. It's not reality. And so things like government and social behavior, they're rules and codes that we abide by, but they're not visible. They're invisible,
yes.
right? Yeah, definitely. And we're not aware of that.
And so we're trying to raise our awareness of the invisible world. I'm always trying to raise my awareness of, why do I process this way? Where does this come from? Where's this idea taking root?
It's a very interesting process to go through.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like, it's not clear. It's not like here's the step-by-step process. It's just something I've been engaging with a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to try and go through a thing where I question all of my beliefs and things of where does that come from? Why do I believe that? Why has that become something that's so hardened into my brain? I believe that about myself and who I am, about other people. I continually try to challenge it and look at what might be the source of it, and then maybe say, it could be the opposite, right? And it can lead to a lot of problems because it's like my mind is always swimming and I'm never really think anything is certain. I'm always, seeing the opposite side of it. But I think in the end, it's a very healthy process.
How do you, I love where we're going, because it kind of comes back to your same point, your earlier point about how someone of strong character knows how to take criticism, which means they know how to deal with the opposite of what they think or feel. And so this idea that you're sharing now, that it's healthy to be able to question, to evaluate, to assess our beliefs and values. But like you said, it's one of the hardest things to do because you get into a space of uncertainty, you question your identity, you lose a sense of direction. How do we question ourselves without losing ourselves and actually realize that that is the process of discovering and building ourselves?
Who really are you in the end? What constitutes you, the essence of you? What were you meant to accomplish in this world, right? Your sense of purpose, to use the title of your show. What is it that makes you an individual, makes you unique, that you alone are meant to accomplish in life? Well, it's not given. We don't know it. And a lot of people really, really struggle with trying to figure that out, right? Because they've been programmed by their parents, by their siblings, by the culture, by their teachers, to say this is who you are, this is what you should believe in, this is what you were meant to accomplish in life, this is what's cool and what's not cool, okay? And so you have to question yourself. You have to say, is this really who I am? Am I really interested in this subject? Am I really interested in this kind of person, in getting in a relationship with this kind of person? And so question yourself on that level. You're getting at a deeper and deeper core of maybe who you are at essence. You're cutting away all of the social stuff that has been foisted upon you, that it has nothing to do with you, right? So in some ways, you're kind of a mystery to yourself and you're sort of trying to solve that puzzle. And you have to ask these questions. Is this something I'm actually really interested in? Is this an intrinsically important thing to me? Or is it something that's in the culture or something that other people have told me? And questioning that over and over and over again is not to lead you into this abyss where there's nothing real. It's to get you closer to who you are, to what really matters, to what that essence of you is, to what you were meant to accomplish in life. And once you reach that inner kind of gold, then you have a degree of certainty. Mm-hmm. So I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a writer, right? I had a struggle to figure out what kind of writing I wanted. But knowing that's who I am, probably about at the age of 8, it allowed me to go, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to do that. This isn't important. Why am I following this career path? Why am I wasting my time here? And then, so knowing that kind of core you don't have to keep questioning yourself. So I'm never going to question myself. Why are you a writer? Why are you writing books? You should have been a pop star. You should have been a rock singer. You should have written poetry. You should have been a lawyer. No, I'll never go there because I have that firm ground beneath me. And that's what your questioning is supposed to lead to. Get to the essence of who you are. And once you're there, you have a degree of certainty in your life.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I feel like a big challenge, something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, is a big challenge of where that comes from is because we care so much about what people think, and we're scared of being an unsuccessful version of ourselves because we'd rather be a successful version of what someone else wants us to be.
Yeah.
And so we're scared of being an unsuccessful writer if we could be a successful accountant. We're scared of being an unsuccessful artist because we'd rather be a successful tech person, whatever else it may be, fill in your blank. And because what we think people think of us has such a strong hold on us that we can't pivot to our passions, we can't maneuver to our purpose, we can't accept that maybe I'm not what this person wants me to be. And I've been spending a lot of time in this to try and figure out, let's dive into it from different perspectives. But I guess, how much, Robert, do you care what people think of you, and how have you made sense of that over your time as someone who obviously writes that a lot of people enjoy your reading? People may disagree with you, they may agree with you, people, as you said, debate, discuss, but how have you made sense of that, and what's been your process of dealing with how you think people think about you?
There's how people think about me who know me personally, and there's how people think about me in the social realm who don't know me personally and who have an idea of who I am, which is often very different from the reality. But naturally, as a human being, I care that people understand that I'm a certain way, that I have a certain character, that I actually love jokes and silly bathroom humor, and that, I like stupid movies, and that I'm not always, reading heavy philosophy. My wife can tell you all about this childish side of my personality. So, it's always been important to me to feel kind of authentic and sincere. And I've always hated, and it's probably why I wrote the 48 Laws of Power. I hate people who are pretending to be something that they're not. Deeply, deeply wounds me, and I don't know why. I don't know why it's been like this since I was a child. Maybe I suspected that in my parents, the kind of falseness that upsets me deeply. And so I wrote the 48 Laws of Power because I felt people are such hypocrites. They pretend that they're not interested in power, but that's all they're interested in, right? They wear this front like, oh, I just want to help people. I just want to make movies and culture and art. No, you're interested in power. So it's always been deeply important to me to kind of reveal what's really going on in someone and to sort of feel that way about myself. So when I don't feel like I'm myself, when I feel like I'm faking it, and sometimes, to be honest with you, Jay, being a kind of quote unquote self-help guru, it feels false. It doesn't feel like who I am. I feel like a bit of an imposter. That's not really what I wanted to be.
Can relate to that.
I just wanted to write books. I love ideas. I love thoughts. I love expanding my consciousness, right? So the feeling that I'm not being who I am and that other people are kind of glomming onto that is upsetting to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Oh, no, that's resonating so deeply with me. I think it's so interesting, isn't it? How your self-perception is so different from people's projection onto you. And so I can identify with that. I do what I do because I'm just sharing what I love. Right. So I love meditation. I love wisdom books. I love traditions. I love ancient wisdom and modern science and seeing the parallels between the two. And I just love talking about that and sharing that.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever thought of myself as a guru or a guide or that kind of individual. But we in society, if someone shares or teaches or gives insight or advice, we box them or bucket them as that. So same as you,
Right.
we'd go in the same bucket, even though we kind of do similar things, but very different things. And we probably have some similar interests and some different interests. And it's interesting how there isn't a space. Like I often say to people, I'm just trying to be everyone's spiritual friend. Like that's my goal. Like I'm that guy who's introducing my friends to cool things that they may not have come across, whether it's Eastern spirituality or wisdom or whatever it may be. Like I'm that guy, and that's all I want to be. I don't want to be anything else.
Right.
But it's hard when you almost get put on a pedestal, even though you didn't ask for that or didn't want that.
Well, people's perception of you can almost become how you perceive yourself if you're not careful.
For sure.
You know? And so that's why I keep coming back to myself and going, is that really who I am?
Yes.
I don't think so, Robert. You know? And also, I actually I'm a flawed individual. I'm a flawed human being. I have, blind spots in my nature. I have compulsions that I wish I didn't have. And I don't like this idea that people think I'm this powerful person who's figured everything out. Because I'm not. That's why, I wrote the book, The Laws of Human Nature. It was because I understand that I shared the same flaws, that I have narcissistic tendencies, that I too can feel envy, that I have moments of grandiosity. So I'm not comfortable with the idea like that I'm this somebody that I'm not, that the perception of me is. But that's what happens to a lot of successful, famous people. They become trapped in what other people are thinking about them. They become trapped in that image. Mm-hmm. And I honestly think, I could be way off base, but I'm thinking of somebody like Anthony Bourdain, who committed suicide. I think he was burdened and weighed down so much by how people thought of himself, and it wasn't who he was. Mm-hmm. And it kind of made him feel deeply uncomfortable. Now, I'm sure there were many other issues going on, but a lot of times, can make you uncomfortable in your own skin, the way people perceive you, and it can lead to deep feelings of depression and a loss of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, could write a new book called The Flaws of Human Nature. It's like,
thank you. That's what the book is. Really.
Yeah.
It's the 18 dark corners of human nature. But yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, it's just a thought of like, it is true. There's a seeking of perfection, and there's a sense that we've created in the world of before and after, in the sense that if you look at like a workout program, and there's nothing wrong with this because it makes sense, but there's a before picture and there's an after picture. And if someone's wealthy, it's like they were poor and now they're rich, and everything's a linear before and after journey. And what we're talking about, and I fully agree with you on this, is that actually all of my challenges are cyclical and they're different. So it's not that I never feel envy anymore. It's that I feel it differently to how I felt it 10 years ago. And hopefully I'm a bit better at dealing with it and understanding it and engaging with it than I was 10 years ago. But it's not that it doesn't affect me anymore.
Right.
And same with spiraling thoughts. It's not that I don't have anxious or negative thoughts anymore because I'm enlightened. I still have those thoughts. I just deal with them better than I did 10 years ago. And I probably have more tools to help me engage with them.
That's true. That's very
true. And I think that cyclical nature is a wonderful thing to accept as an individual and as someone who's learning, because you then don't fool yourself to think, oh, there will be one day where I will no longer have a negative or anxious thought like Jay and Robert. Like, they probably never have it. It's like, well, yeah, I probably have less, but it's not that I never have them.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that kind of idea of this before and after, I think, is what confuses so many people, because it feels like, oh, there is a point at which I never have to go back to being this version of myself.
Well, that life isn't like that. It's weird sometimes because before the 48 Laws of Power came out, I was just this nobody living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Santa Monica, rent controlled, never really made any money, never really had any success in life. And I was constantly giving people advice, but nobody would listen to me because I hadn't written the book. And suddenly the book comes out and I'm supposed to be a different person. It's very strange, but I'm actually the same person that I was when I was living in that miserable 1-bedroom apartment, and giving out my advice that nobody listened to. Now people listen to it, but the only difference is because suddenly I have this credential, which is very strange.
Yeah, I can relate to that in so many ways. I used to be mentoring, coaching people in my community. I would do these little events in London 10, 11 years ago now, where like 5 people would show up and it was, I was just doing it. I would speak at universities for free for years. It's been such a big part of my life to just do this. I've always wanted to be someone who's learning and sharing. That's what I enjoy. I enjoy learning and I enjoy sharing. And I enjoy synthesizing and making things simple and practical for other people. That's what I get my joy from. And I was always inspired by 2 quotes. One is Ivan Pavlov, where he said, if you want a new idea, read an old book. And so that's always been something that my work has been inspired by. It's always based on ideas that seem timeless, but they're and old.
Very beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's another thought from Einstein, which is another part of what inspires my work,